Silent Hill 2 is not merely a horror game. It's a meditation, a descent into the soul, a place where guilt, memory, and repression take shape as monsters and mist. When we follow James Sunderland into the fog, we aren't just entering a cursed town. We are stepping into the unconscious. What makes Silent Hill 2 timeless isn't its scares, it's its honesty. Few games dare to reveal what truly frightens us, not death, but the truth of who we are when no one else is looking. And so, through the lens of Carl Jung, the father of death psychology, we will see James' journey not as a story of punishment or madness, but as a heroic path of individuation, a spiritual process where a man shattered by guilt and repression must walk through the fog of his own soul to find wholeness. In this video, I will discuss what I think are the 5 spiritual lessons Silent Hill 2 teaches us. Lessons not just for gamers, but for anyone who has ever felt lost in their own darkness. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more video game practical wisdom for everyday mental health.
Look, my name is James Sunderland.
Before examining his lessons, it's crucial to understand the man at the heart of them. James Sunderland is not a hero in the conventional sense. He is a broken, neurotic, regretful, and morally ambiguous figure. James grew up in a loving relationship with Mary, yet their marriage became shadowed by her illness. As she slipped away, her body racked with pain and confusion, her moods often cruel, James became increasingly depressed, withdrawn into alcohol and denial. Silent Hill summons James not to conquer evil, but to confront his own fragmented psyche. He holds guilt not only over Mary's death, arguably an act of mercy mixed with deep resentment and exhaustion, but also over all the suffering experienced during her illness. His emotional absence, suppressed frustration, and ultimate passivity. James is not a monster. He is a man who, like many, did what he thought was necessary in the moment, yet is unable to reconcile with the shadow of his actions. His walk into Silent Hill is less a journey for answers, more a pilgrimage into the fog of self-disintegration. Silent Hill itself is a bizarre, parallel reality, a psychological landscape filled by the nightmares, regrets, and traumas of its visitors. Each distortion in the town reflects the visiting soul's psychological wounds. For James, everything is seen through the lens of guilt, repression, and sorrow. Lesson 1. The call to adventure, healing the unconscious.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
Every journey of transformation begins with a call, a whisper from the unconscious that something within us demands to be faced. For James, that call arrives in the form of a letter from his wife, Mary, who has been dead for years. Rationally, it makes no sense, but that's the point. In Jungian psychology, the unconscious speaks through irrational symbols, dreams, synchronicities, impossible messages. It doesn't argue, it beckons. Jung wrote that the unconscious does not speak in words, but in images. And the images here, a dead wife summoning her husband to a fog-covered town, is an archetypal invitation. Descend into the depths, face what you have repressed, and reclaim your lost soul. Silent Hill itself functions as a psychic mirror, a living symbol of the unconscious. It shifts its form depending on who enters, reflecting the hidden fears, traumas, and desires they carry within. For James, Silent Hill isn't a geographical location. It's the map of his own psyche. Each alleyway is a forgotten memory. Each monster, a buried emotion. Each puzzle, a locked truth. This is the first spiritual lesson of the game, and of life itself. Follow the irrational call of your unconscious. When life presents you with a summons that defies logic, a dream that won't leave you, a creative pull that you can't explain, a feeling that something deeper wants to be understood, don't dismiss it, follow it. Because that's the first step of individuation, to leave the comfort of repression and step into the fog of the unknown. In mythic terms, this is the call to adventure. In Jungian terms, it's the moment the conscious ego first hears the soul's voice. James could have ignored the letter. He could have stayed home, convincing himself that Mary was gone forever. But then his suffering would remain untransformed, his shadow unintegrated. By answering the letter's call, James begins what Jung called the descent into the unconscious, the dark night of the soul that every seeker must face. And so must we. Whenever the world inside us sends a signal that doesn't fit logic, our choice is simple. Do we stay in the familiar world of denial, or step into the mist to find what our soul is asking of us?
I guess I don't really care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going either way.
But why?
I'm looking for someone. Someone very important to me.
Lesson 2. Meeting the shadow, monsters of guilt and repression. If the latter was the call, the monsters are the confrontation. Carl Jung described the shadow as the dark half of our personality. Everything we deny, reject, or repress about ourselves. Not necessarily evil, but frightening because it's true. Silent Hill gives that shadow form. Every grotesque creature in the town is not random horror. It's symbolic manifestation of James' psyche. The lying figures, wrapped in suffocating skin, represent suffocated guilt and suppressed emotion. The bubblehead nurses, hypersexual yet faceless, mirror James' repressed sexual frustration and shame over Mary's illness. And at the center of this nightmare stands Pyramid Head, the executioner, the punisher, the archetype of judgment. Pyramid Head isn't simply a monster chasing James. He is James' conscience made flesh, his self-created tormentor, a projection of his moral conflict, a distorted reflection of the part of him that knows what he's done. Jung said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. James tries to fight or flee these monsters, just as we all try to avoid our guilt, shame, and anger. But each encounter brings him closer to acknowledgement. The monsters will not die until he accepts them as part of himself. This is where horror transforms into healing, because to become whole, we must first look into the darkness without flinching.
Eddie, you can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
The monsters you fear most are aspects of yourself you need to confront most. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Every time you face your anger, jealousy, shame, or desire without judgment, you reclaim another piece of your soul. In this way, Pyramid Head becomes not just tormentor, but guide, forcing James to face the truth he's buried. In other words, healing does not mean becoming good, it means becoming whole. The gamer's journey through Silent Hill, like James, is an act of shadow work. Every monster we confront on the screen is a rehearsal for the ones we must confront within. The closer James comes to the truth, the heavier the air becomes. The hospital descends into rot. The prison echoes with remorse. And the Lakeview Hotel, once their special place, is flooded with decay. This is the moment in every healing journey where denial cracks and guilt pours in like water. James finally sees the videotape, himself standing over Mary's sickbed, smothering her with a pillow. The scene is quiet, merciful even, yet unbearable. He didn't kill her out of hatred. He killed her because he couldn't bear her suffering and his own helplessness. But mercy mixed with resentment becomes poison. In Jungian terms, this is a confrontation with the shadow of guilt, the darkest layer of the unconscious. It's where we must descend before any rebirth can occur. James falls to his knees, not in punishment, but in recognition. Only through sorrow does he glimpse love again. True forgiveness begins when we stop identifying with our actions alone and start seeing the wounded consciousness beneath them. We all have something we regret, words unsaid, kindness withheld, choices made in fear. Guilt can either drown us or humble us into growth. For James, the fog lifts when he accepts his humanity, not his innocence, but his capacity to feel remorse and still choose life. The lake in the game symbolizes that crossing from repression to acceptance, from stagnation to movement. And so he drives into it, not as an escape, but as a final merging with truth. Depending on the player's choices, he may live, die, or begin anew, but the essential journey is the same. Forgiveness is rebirth. If you've ever carried a secret shame, remember this. You are not your sin, you are not your past. You are the awareness that learned from it, and that awareness is capable of infinite renewal.
I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready.
Lesson 3. The Punishment Dream. Suffering as the path to redemption. Silent Hill can be understood as a punishment dream, a psychic purgatory constructed by James' guilt. James has committed an act so unbearable that his mind has split into two, one half desperately seeking redemption, the other clinging to denial. James' suppressed memories and emotions create a psychotic break, a symbolic reality in which suffering endlessly loops until it is confronted. The architectural design of Silent Hill itself is a symbol of his unconscious. Hotels, hospitals, prisons, and labyrinths appear and distort in response to James' psychic wounds, replaying cycles of pain and guilt. The punishment is not external, but self-administered. Each encounter with a monster, each replay of Maria's death, is the psyche striving to process the trauma it cannot integrate. Jung described the process of transformation as alchemical. The stage of nigredo, or blackening, represents despair and dissolution. The breaking down of old self-concepts, identities, and defenses until truth is revealed. The crucible of suffering is necessary, as pain alerts us to unresolved wounds and invites us to become conscious. The psyche, Jung taught, uses suffering to force growth. Pain is not meaningless. It is the signal of something unhealed demanding consciousness. James' suffering is repetitive, recursive, just like real psychological suffering. We replay our traumas until we finally learn from them. Every encounter in Silent Hill repeats the same emotional motive: guilt, denial, confrontation, brief clarity, relapse, until James finally remembers the truth that he, in a moment of weakness and despair, ended Mary's life. It's only when this truth surfaces that his world begins to shift. In Jung's language, this is confronting the complex, the emotionally charged cluster of repressed memories that dominates our behavior from the shadows. Until we bring it into awareness, it controls us completely. James' suffering, then, is not punishment by an external force. It is self-administered purification, a psychological crucible designed to burn away illusion. Suffering, when faced consciously, becomes the fire that transforms us. Jung called this the alchemy of the soul. The old self must be dissolved through grief, guilt, and honesty before a new self can be reborn. We resist suffering because it feels like death, but in truth, it is death, the death of the false self. And beyond that death lies renewal. Every moment of pain, confusion, or loss in our lives is another fog-covered street in Silent Hill. If we dare to walk through it, not to escape it, we will find that the fog begins to clear.
But this has to stop. It's time to let it go.
Lesson 4. The Anima, Feminine Archetypes, and the Healing of the Heart. If the shadow is the darkness we reject, the anima is the love we've forgotten. In Jungian psychology, the anima is the inner feminine, the part of the male psyche that connects him to emotion, intuition, and mystery of life. To ignore the anima is to live half a soul. Silent Hill 2 overflows with anima symbolism. Each woman James meets embodies an aspect of his fractured relationship with the feminine, both within and without. Mary, his deceased wife, represents love, compassion, and forgiveness, the nurturing aspect of the soul that James has lost. Angela, broken by trauma and abuse, personifies the wounded feminine, the reflection of collective suffering, of empathy unmet. And Laura, the innocent child, symbolizes the pure anima, uncorrupted feeling, the capacity for genuine love and playfulness that James has repressed. Then comes Maria. She looks just like Mary, same face, same voice, but her manner is different. Where Mary was gentle and fading, Maria is flirtatious, alive, impossible to ignore. She's not Mary resurrected, she's James' Anima, the feminine soul image described by Jung, the inner counterpart that bridges a man's conscious mind and his unconscious feelings. Maria embodies everything James repressed while caring for his dying wife: desire, spontaneity, vitality. He yearns for her, protects her, loses her again and again. And every time she dies, he's forced to relive what he did to Mary. The game's cruel repetition isn't punishment, it is initiation. In our own lives, the anima, or animus for women, speaks through dreams, emotions, creativity, the softer voice beneath logic. When we ignore it, we become hollow, rational shells. When we listen, we reconnect with intuition and empathy, the capacity to love fully again. Maria seduces James not to destroy him, but to refuel him. She shows the life he denied himself, the warmth buried under guilt. By acknowledging her, James moves closer to wholeness. He learns that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating all its colors, light and dark alike. The anima's lesson is one of compassion for others and for ourselves. If we silence that inner voice of feeling, we lose the map back to our humanity. But if we dare to listen, we find what James ultimately seeks: not Mary, not escape, but understanding. To encounter the anima is to meet every emotion with avoidance, desire, grief, tenderness, compassion. But integration requires balance. Maria's seduction cannot heal James. Only truth can. Mary's forgiveness can't erase guilt. Only acceptance can. Through these women, James is forced to confront his own emotional failings, his inability to feel, to empathize, to forgive himself. To become whole, you must embrace your inner feminine, the capacity to feel deeply, to create, to nurture, and to forgive. In Jung's words, the anima is the bridge to the self. Without her, a man is cut off from his soul. This is why Silent Hill's world feels so haunted. It's not only the ghost of Mary, but the ghost of James' own neglected heart. By acknowledging the anima, by seeing Mary, Maria, Angela, and Laura not as others, but as mirrors of himself, James takes another step toward individuation. Lesson 5. Individuation. Navigating the labyrinth to wholeness. All paths in Silent Hill lead to the labyrinth, the archetypal image of the soul's journey inward. In Jung's psychology, the labyrinth represents the process of individuation, the spiral path toward becoming one's true, integrated self. The labyrinth is not meant to be escaped. It is meant to be walked. Each turn, each dead end, each confrontation with a monster or memory is a descent deeper into truth. At the center of the labyrinth is the self, the defined totality that includes both light and shadow. James' journey through Silent Hill is ultimately his path toward that center. He must face not only his guilt, but also his illusion of control, his fear of love, and his refusal to feel. Only by accepting both his sin and his sorrow can he approach wholeness. The path of individuation is not about perfection, it is about integration. To individuate is to make peace with every part of yourself, your monsters, your memories, your desires, your grief. Jung called this state individuation. Is the integration of all parts of the self into a coherent whole. It doesn't mean perfection, it means authenticity. To live no longer divided against oneself. In Jung's words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Silent Hill is fate, until James makes it conscious. Then it becomes revelation. Each of us walks our own labyrinth, foggy, confusing, filled with echoes of regret and hope. But if we stay the course, guided by the faint light of awareness, we reach the same realization James glimpses at the end. Wholeness was never about escaping the darkness. It was about walking through it with courage. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Silent Hill 2 stands as one of gaming's most profound artistic achievements, not because of the jump scares or plot twist, but because it mirrors the structure of the human soul. Through James Sunderland's descent, we witness the eternal drama of the psyche, the call to adventure, the meeting of the shadow, the trial of suffering, the encounter with the Anima, and the final emergence into wholeness. Jung called this the path of individuation, the heroic journey each of us must walk to reclaim our true self. The letter from Mary, read in full at the end, is not just addressed to James, it is addressed to us. She writes of love enduring beyond mistakes, of gratitude for the time they shared, of release. It's the voice of forgiveness, the higher self speaking through the fog of pain. Mary tells him to love, to find happiness again, to stop punishing himself. And that's what every wounded heart eventually must do. We all have our own silent hill, a place built from our regrets, where the streets loop and the fog thickens every time we turn away from the truth. But somewhere in that town is a letter, written by the part of us that still believes in healing, waiting to be read. When we face the monsters, when we listen to the Anima, when we forgive ourselves, we finally open the letter, and the words we read are simple.
I want you to go on. I want you to live. For yourself and for others. Like you did for me. James, you made me happy.